the day after October 7th, the holiday was over. My kids, my daughter, her husband, and six kids returned from Israel. The next day, I was on a plane to Israel, and I went to Kfar Aza. I went to Sderot. I saw what they did to our people. I heard what they did to men, women, and children, the butchery that went on, the cruelty, the barbarism that went on, the kind of things that I don't want to specifically go into detail on this show to describe what they did to women. What they did to women, it's not. And by the way, people say, the Nazis were different, and we know how horrible they were. But the Nazis hid the horrors they committed against our people. They didn't want people to know. German soldiers who would send pictures home to their girlfriends or wives from the concentration camps got into trouble. But Hamas, these monsters, they were videoing the horrors that they were committing against children, against women. They were so proud, and so was that world in the Middle East, the radical Islamist world, and maybe even beyond that, okay? They were proud of what was being done to little babies, burning babies. I was there. I had to avoid walking on the dry blood of those homes in Kfar Aza, home after home that I went into.
Hey, culminators, how are you? It is spring by the time you see this, which is a very encouraging development. A lot of thawing, a lot of warming up is taking place in the world, hopefully. I want to introduce you to a friend of mine who I've known for a few years, but whom I have known of as far back as I can remember. Not that he's old, I'm not saying that, but, but Dov Hikind has been part of the scene for many, many years, and he's going to explain to us. He is a distinguished New York activist who has had many, many adventures, and he is, he'll get us up to speed on what's going on now. We bump into each other at, uh, Jewish events and on the internet frequently. It's really going to be fun talking to him. Doug, welcome to the show. How are you?
Good, Ron. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
You're welcome. You were on the city council, right?
I was in the New York State Assembly, state
Uh,
legislature for 36 years.
assembly. I knew it was one or the other.
Yeah.
You were never my assemblyman because I lived. Oh, maybe. Okay, what district did you cover? It depends on what part of my life I lived in, what part of Brooklyn.
So I represented most of Borough Park, the heart of the Jewish community. Also, for the first 30 years, Dyker Heights, heavily Italian area, places like Midwood. It was, and then it changed a little bit, but that's basically the story. Midwood, Borough Park, Dyker Heights, Bay
And when did
Ridge.
you leave the assembly?
I left the assembly in 2017 after 36 years.
Oh, so it's a pretty good bet that you were my assemblyman when I lived on Avenue I Ocean Parkway
Oh, for sure.
when I
Oh,
was in Berlin.
without question. And in fact, I lived on L off Ocean Parkway for many, many years. So we were literally neighbors.
That's right.
No question about that.
Well, folks, the Jews in this part of Brooklyn do live very close to each other.
They have no
No question.
choice on top of each other.
On top of each other. And let's not talk about the traffic.
Yeah, yeah.
I always tell people that the traffic in what we call Flatbush, it's really Midwood, is what we used to be like in Borough Park. And the traffic in Borough Park, you don't even try to describe.
Impossible. We actually live in Woodmere, New York, the area called the Five Towns, and it's like a different world. Look, I love the areas that I represented. They were very good to me. I was proud to represent those communities, Jew and non-Jew, didn't matter. But it is a difficult world to maneuver. You talk about traffic. Whenever I go back to that area, I wonder how did I manage,
Yeah, really is.
driving down Avenue J or down, any of the streets in Borough Park. Forget it, 14th Avenue, 13th Avenue. It's quite an experience.
So you tell me the story. How did you, if you were in the assembly that long, you must have been, I guess, 5 or 10 years old when you first entered, right?
Just a touch older than that, just a touch. Look, my actual background, when I was growing up, the idea of going into politics, running for office, never crossed my mind. When I got married in 1975, uh, my wife, Shani, from Tulsa, Oklahoma, her father was a rabbi there for 38 years. The last thing we ever discussed was running for office. That was not something I understood or cared. Or my background at that point in life was being a Jewish activist, and I mean in a very serious way. I was involved with the Jewish Defense League with Rabbi Kahane of blessed memory. I was in the streets. I was chaining myself to the Soviet mission. I was doing whatever I could in the world for my people because someone told me that the people, our fellow Jews in the Soviet Union at that time, right now you say Soviet Union, Soviet Jewry, Ron. I tried this with young people. They don't know what I'm talking about. What is Soviet Jewry? They have no freaking clue. But
No,
those
it's
were
all
the,
it's all oh, the Soviet Union, that's where everybody shared everything, right?
yeah, look, 3 million of our people who could not study Hebrew, forget about going to a synagogue. They were being spiritually annihilated. And someone said, those are our brothers and sisters, Ron. We need to be there for them and we need to do everything possible. I took that seriously and I got involved. It's a long story how I got involved, but I said, if you care, if it's your brother or sister, well, what in the world would you not do for your brother and sister? So I got involved day and night, doing whatever in the world. I even went to the Soviet Union in 1973 to protest. That's a long story, also. Uh, Working on a book that will come out in about 6 months
Oh,
that will fascinate people, shock people with a lot of great stories. But I went to Russia in '73 with six other people. I wasn't wearing my yarmulke. We were just six people visiting the Soviet Union. We went there for the purpose of protesting in Moscow. We were nuts. We were crazy. I was young. We got arrested by the KGB at the airport and got thrown out of the country, put on a plane to Istanbul and then Israel. I mean, that's part of my life because
well, I remember. Yeah, I mean that animated. I'm a couple years younger than you, but that animated so many of us in those days. And when I was in college, that was something I threw myself into. Also, was getting petitions signed, going to the Capitol and lobbying for Soviet Jews, and as well as non-Jewish um, victims of censorship. Sakharov, I mean, we to us it was yes, obviously it was our brother and sister. They were our brother and sisters, but we understood that the system operated by being very broadly authoritarian, whatever. Where'd you go to yeshiva?
I went to. Let me shock you. My father was a visionist of Chassid. He was Chassidic. Again, my father was a survivor. My mother, survivors of the Holocaust. My mother went to Auschwitz in 1944. Uh, Her mother, etc., brothers, sisters, nephews, nieces. The day they arrived at Auschwitz, they went straight to the gas chambers. My father went through forced labor camps. So that's sort of, my background and where I come from. So his father was Vishnitz. That's a Hasidic group. In those days, my father never had the beard and wore the special, the kaftan, and so on, or Streimel. But my father was a Vishnitzer. And
People don't
as a,
understand that in that generation, you could be considered a chassid, a member of the Hasidic community of a particular group or rabbi, and not and not have you could still be you'd be a businessman, you could be clean shaven,
Absolutely. And my
but
father was.
he was your guy, and you went to him for everything.
Absolutely. And my father uh, didn't have the uniform, but he loved that sect. And I grew up in that environment and actually went to two Hasidic yeshivas as a kid. It wasn't my choice, Bells and Vishnitz. And it was my mother fighting with my father, who wanted me to get a little more of a secular education, who I ended up going to what was like an Ivy League yeshiva at that time called Torah Vodaas. So I ended up in Torah Vodaas for many, many years,
So
went to
I
college.
so let me explain to the viewers that Torah Vodaas wasn't an elite institution in its way, and it was also the dominant non-Hasidic um, Jewish educational and cultural institution in Brooklyn, which at that time, when Lakewood was just a couple of guys around a kitchen table,
Right.
when at that time was the center of the Orthodox Jewish world in North America. So a lot of future communal leaders are connected to or come out of Torah Vodaas because it was again it was the center of the solar system.
And Ron, it had a great English department. I mean, great English department. Uh, Everybody went, by the way, almost everyone went to college, very different from what's going on today
Well,
in
you'll
that
meet Torah
world.
Vodaas guys your age and older, all over the legal profession. Not they're
Right.
former
Yeah.
not Orthodox.
By the way, we all went to college at night. We were in yeshiva during the day. We were studying the Talmud,
City
etc.
College, Brooklyn College.
I got a BA from Queens College. I got an MA from Brooklyn College, all in political science, very practical. Nobody was studying political science. I mean, everybody was going to be an accountant or a lawyer. And then I actually worked towards my PhD, which I never finished at the Graduate Center. If I hadn't gotten elected in 1983, I would have a PhD. But I went quite a distance towards a PhD. But just to explain, uh, after being involved as a Jewish activist for Soviet Jewry, someone actually came to me and said, you could do the same thing that you've been doing, fighting not just for Soviet Jewry, anti-Semitism, fighting for Syrian Jewry in those days, and on, Jewish poor. Not all Jews are rich. In fact, overwhelmingly, they're not rich. They're middle class and many, many poor Jews. So I was involved in all of these issues. Someone said, you could do this as an elected official. I said, really? How do you become an elected official? I had no idea. Petitions, you got to petition, you got to run, you got to raise money. But I ran twice, lost, and then I ran in 1983 for the New York State Assembly against an incumbent, and I spent the next 36 years in the assembly, 18 times. Every 2 years, you have to run for reelection. And like I said, there is nothing there, as far as I'm concerned, there's no better thing that you could do in life than being an elected official if you will be committed, if you will not forget who you are, if you will be there for the people, trying to make a difference in people's lives, and not being afraid to speak out and do what has to be done, which I think to a great extent I did for 36 years.
Listen, that was the impression that everybody had of you, as opposed to Chuck Schumer.
Oh, please don't. I, you know, I gotta tell you, it hurts me to say this, but you and I both know that for anyone who studies Jewish history, and I mean all parts of Jewish history, for the last couple of thousand years, there's one thing that never changes. We have our enemies, the anti-Semitism, that doesn't change. I'm reading a book now. This is amazing. My one of my kids actually told me to get this. The book was written in 1936. It's about the Jews in Germany for 13 centuries before 1930. Can you imagine? The book is written in 1936, and let me tell you, it is so freaking depressing. You read about every period of the history of Germany. It wasn't Germany because Germany was not united until the 19th century, but murdering Jews, butchering Jews, torturing Jews, burning down synagogues, you name it. It's all part of that history, as well as in France and England and every other country in the world, and nothing has changed. And one of the other things, Ron, that comes across all the time in history is the fact that the worst offenders, the most dangerous people for the Jewish people very often, were fellow Jews. Jews who sold out, Jews who converted, and they became the most dangerous. Look, Karl Marx. Adolf Hitler didn't have to make it up. All he had to do was use, all he had to do was use the words of Karl Marx about the Jewish people. I mean, and this goes on throughout history. And Chuck Schumer, Senator Schumer, who likes to describe himself, he describes himself as the most senior Jew ever in Washington. To me, he is a betrayer of America, a betrayer of the Jewish people. And I've even called him a capo, Ron, and I have no regrets, because it's people like him during the war back in March of, I think, 2024, was it? That when he called, literally, he just about called on, he said new elections in Israel. He doesn't like Bibi Netanyahu. Can you imagine the United States, the senior senator, majority leader, interfering in Israel's democracy during the war with Hamas? And he, by the way, Ron, he's the protector of the Jewish people. You know that, right? Because
I was at how many dinners have I been at? He shows up and he expects, he's not part of the program. I don't think he's doing this anymore because everyone hates him.
Absolutely. He's the Shomer Yisrael, protector of the Jewish people. With protectors like that, Ron, we end up in Auschwitz.
Terrible, terrible, terrible man. And he and Nadler just last week issued twin statements about what a fascist Netanyahu is. I mean, they're puppets on strings. These guys can't imagine life. Like, you paid your civic dues. You put in your time. And you moved the hell out of that hellhole that's now the city. I mean, we love it, but we also know it's become unlivable. So you're living in the five towns. God bless you. These guys can't imagine life as anything other than members of Congress and members of the Senate, and they will say whatever they have to say to maintain their good standings. Now, I'd like to ask you what happened to the Democratic Party. We don't know what the answer is, but what happened to the people who are reelecting these clowns over and over and over again? And I mean the Jews.
Ron, there is some change going on. There's no question. In places like Brooklyn, you have quite a few people, both in the Assembly, the State Senate, who have been elected just in the last couple of years who are Republican. People like Ina Vernikov, others as well.
Course,
so
right.
There is some kind of change going on. But unfortunately, it's not enough. And part of the problem is, again, you and I understand this. To many Jews, it is so obvious what the Biden administration did to Israel for such a long period of time, literally tying Israel's hands. Let's just remember that it was the Biden administration that told Israel not to go into Rafah against Hamas. I mean, I went to Israel, Ron, literally the day after October 7th, the holiday was over. My kids, my daughter, her husband, and 6 kids returned from Israel. The next day, I was on a plane to Israel. And I went to Kfar Aza. I went to Sderot. I saw what they did to our people. I heard what they did to men, women, and children, the butchery that went on, the cruelty, the barbarism that went on, the kind of things that I don't want to specifically go into detail on this show to describe what they did to women. What they did to women, it's not, and by the way, people say, the Nazis were different, and we know how horrible they were. But, the Nazis hid the horrors they committed against our people. They didn't want people to know. German soldiers who would send pictures home to their girlfriends or wives from the concentration camps got into trouble. But Hamas, these monsters, they were videoing the horrors that they were committing against children, against women. They were so proud, and so was that world in the Middle East, the radical Islamist world, and maybe even beyond that. Okay, they were proud of what was being done to little babies, burning babies. I was there. I had to avoid walking on the dry blood of those homes in Kfar Aza, home after home that I went into. So,
So when
and,
you
and
have elected officials like Jerry Nadler and Chuck Schumer who are covering not only for these people, but for their supporters in America, like Chuck Schumer with his email to Colombia, don't worry about this, you
oh my
know,
God, yeah, I
this
remember.
crap
Oh
that,
God,
okay, what an absolute piece of trash. Okay, fine. But Schumer might be finished, but what about the Jewish liberals who are absolutely, they can't get out of the thrall of the idea that they must always, that these people must always be reelected. People are always asking me, why? And I mean people, I mean non-Jews, Christians, evangelicals, Catholics. Why are so many Jews less concerned about Israel politically than we are?
yeah. Look, the reality is, Ron, when they ask this question of the what are the top issues that you care about, to a lot of these liberal Jews, they're not connected to the Jewish people. Their name may be Goldberg, okay, but they're not connected to, or Weinstein or anything like that, but they're not connected to the Jewish people. Look, our best friends, Ron, you know this, are non-Jews, evangelicals in this country. God bless them. They are amazing. Look at the people in the Trump administration. You know, it's like nonstop. Okay. Uh, Amazing individuals, people who really get it. It's, by the way, it's not just the political statements they make in support of Israel. It's from their heart and soul, their
Oh,
very
100%.
soul. They really believe this. They understand what Israel represents. So, you know, this is the reality, Ron. Nothing has changed. That's what I'm trying to say. Nothing has changed. Some of our worst
You mean
betrayers are Jews.
right? Well, nothing has changed historically. I mean, there was this moment, I guess it was like a good 30, 35 years after the founding of the State of Israel, when Israel was considered to be something that united 95% of Jews in the United States. So the Jews who are less Jewish minded than you and I, nonetheless cared enough about Israel that it informed their politics. Uh, who were the 5% before? It was the real self-haters, the left wingers, and the handful of lunatics in certain, anti-Zionist. I mean, fine, but well over 95%. 20 years later, you either completely committed or you give it. What I see is that, like, people in my extended family who are not religious, they'll give Israel lip service, but to them, the Democratic Party is the only, like, what is it that makes them so, the cognitive discipline,
Ron, I think it's a
dissonance?
disease. I think it's a disease for a lot of people, to be quite honest. But all of it began to change when Israel had the audacity, Ron, in 1967. I remember those days. I remember exactly where I was. I remember exactly what I was listening to. The period of the Six-Day War, when Israel was surrounded by the Syrians, the Jordanians, the Egyptians. Ron, I can picture right now as I speak to you. I see the picture of Egyptian soldiers marching through the streets of Cairo with the chant that they were going to push the Jews into the sea, that they were going to destroy Israel. I remember that. The Jordanians were part of it. The Syrians were part of it. Saddam Hussein, right? Israel had the audacity, Ron. What chutzpah. A lot of people in the world, they love dead Jews. The New York Times loves dead Jews. We get sympathy when Jews are murdered. That's when you get an
Well,
editorial
until
saying,
October 7th, we did. Until
right,
October
right,
7th.
that's true, that's true. Israel had the audacity to defend itself against the enemies who were out to destroy her in 1967 in a dramatic, historical victory, 6 days in beating its enemies. That was the turning point for many, many people, especially liberals, liberal Jews. Israel became overnight. All they did was defend themselves against those who wanted to destroy them, for God's sake.
But they acted, but they shot first. The Jews shot first, and we're
Oh,
you have to
well,
you can never shoot first.
yeah, 1973, Israel did not shoot first. And we know what happened in 1973. They waited to be attacked first, and then we'll take care of the job. And we know the price that Israel is a little country. I urge all your listeners, go look at a map of the Middle East and get a magnifying glass as you're going to the map, because you will have a hard time even finding Israel on the map because it is so small compared to all the other countries. 22 Arab nations surrounding Israel. You can hardly find Israel on a map, even with Judea and Samaria. You can't find it, it's so small. Israel cannot afford to play games. And when they play games, we know what happened on October 7th. They thought they had things under control. They thought, Hamas, we're talking to them. Money is going to them. They're not going to do anything. That was the mistake that will live forever, forever, because they knew what was going to happen. They just didn't want to believe it.
So, what do you say to people when they ask you, when they bring up the issue of, are you an American or are you Israeli? But the dual loyalty question. And before you answer it, I want to frame it with something that I said I was going to come back to. You talked about our brothers and sisters. I was on Elijah Schaffer's show a few weeks ago because I want to talk to the people who listen to him. And he said to me, you know, where's your loyalty? Is it with America or was it with Israel? I said, I'm an American. Let me ask you, where's your loyalty? Is it with America or is it with your wife and kids? You need to understand, Elijah, that for us Jews, every other Jew is a member of our extended family. So it's a false dichotomy. It's not America or the Jews. Israel is a country that has a great number of my family members in it. So I care about it passionately. I don't have a choice. Like it's a visceral attachment. It can't be otherwise. How do you deal with this when you're confronted in conversation?
Yeah, it's never an issue. I always make it very, very clear that I am a very proud Jew. I say it everywhere. And I love America. America is one of the greatest countries on the face of the, nobody wants to, you don't have people trying to get into Russia or China or Cuba. Can you imagine? Everybody wants to go into these countries or any other country in the world. The only place people want to come to is the United States of America, right? And there's a reason for that, because this is the greatest country on the, not perfect. No country is perfect. No person is perfect, but this is the greatest country on the face of the earth. And you and I know I have had a problem over the decades to be critical of Israel when I think they are wrong, when they're making a mistake. But Israel is a democracy, for God's sake. The values of America and the values of Israel are the same. Israel is a country that is there for America in many, many different ways. The system that Israel uses to defend its population from missiles is one that Donald Trump just announced that he's introducing in the United States of America. It's Israel that actually produced that system. Israel and America, it's like the father and the son. That's what it is. There's never a choice. Oh, are you for America? Are you for Israel? I love America and I love Israel. And you pointed out about your family. Same thing with me. Same thing with everybody. I have uncles, aunts. I have all kinds of family in Israel. So it never has to be a choice. It's not about, well, if Israel does something wrong, and it's not good for America. I got to tell you, Ron, I have never seen that as a problem. It becomes a problem when you have administrations, when you have the Talebs and the Omars and the AOCs and the radicals in by the way, isn't it interesting that the radicals in the Democratic Party, and which is a large part of the Democratic Party, that the people the people that are in the streets of America criticizing Israel, just keep in mind they are burning American flags. America is the big Satan. Israel's the little. They hate what the
and they don't
values of
get these
America
questions.
are.
No one asks them dual loyalty. Palestina, is it you or is it America or Palestina?
Exactly.
No one ever has the audacity to ask that question.
I mean, you burn an American flag. You undermine the values of the United States at every single turn. That's what they are doing. Ron, these guys are coming to our Ivy League universities to get, quote unquote, the best education in the world. Right?
Do you know that over 50% of the student body of Columbia is foreign?
Yeah, of course. Yes. And my tax dollars are going to pay the expenses of Columbia. Does that make sense? Is that insane?
So let me ask. So here's a question. Islam, and we've had this fantastically large influx of Muslim immigrants. Islam is a challenge, presents a real challenge to our ideas of pluralism because it's really incompatible, philosophically. Now, we as Jews, you talked about the assimilation in Germany, over the 1,000 years, and I was telling you how I meet all these people who went to Torah Vodaas when you were there, and they don't. There's nothing Jewish about their lives today. It was very everyone in the 50s and 60s. It was out, not in.
Right.
So we understand that the model of assimilation for American Jews 100 years ago didn't work. The Jews had to be loyal Americans, but they also could not really couldn't go to the same schools, ideally not go to public. How does it now look at the Muslims? Why is it different? Why is it that what do we say to them that when we've learned a lesson that assimilation comes at a great cost to your culture and to your religious heritage? How do we deal with the introduction of this Muslim? I mean, these Muslim politicians are being elected by predominantly Muslim Muslim electorates.
Populations. Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, it's when you watch many of them and many of their supporters, it's not just the actual people like Taleb and Omar, but many, many others who are so radicalized. They so are not what America is all about, and the things that they advocate and the things that they stand for are really dangerous for the future of America. And look, I want to love everybody, Ron, but I can't love everybody. I can't love my enemies. I'm sorry. I can't love people out there in the streets. And by the way, many of them are Jewish, as you know, unfortunately, many of them who advocate for Hamas. If someone says, I am for Palestine, hey, you go right ahead. I don't got a problem with that. You could say that, no problem. I'm not going to get angry at you. I have a different point of view. But when you're out in the streets and you're telling me that you support Hamas, that means you support the barbarism. You support the rape of innocent men, women, and children. And I say that not just women. Men were raped. Horrible. I mean, the famous story of one of the terrorists who, while he was murdering Jews, Ron, he was calling mommy and daddy, civilians in Gaza, and telling the father, I have just murdered 10 people. And what does the father say? Shock. What? What are you saying to me? He says, Allah Akbar, be careful. The guy just murdered 10 Jews, civilians. They love their children. They love their pets. But the Jews need to be eradicated. Christians need to be murdered. Let's make that very, very clear. They hate Christians as much as they hate Jews. They hate America as much as they hate Israel. That is simply a fact of life. I want to love everybody. It's hard to love someone who wants to destroy you and murder you, and take them seriously, what they would do in America if they could get away with it. Thank God for Donald Trump and his administration. Thank God that he is the leader of this country. And by the way, as I said, I'm not perfect. I don't know anyone who's perfect, Ron, except for God. I don't know anyone. I don't know any country in the world, not Israel. No country in the world is perfect. But there is a great difference between the United States of America that everyone wants to come to. Everyone wants to come to America, except for Rosie O'Donnell, who moved to, where did she move to, France or wherever she is? Who gives a darn, right? Like, who cares?
Did you ever think you'd see, though, the shift in the public discourse that is so, you're right. After, I suppose after 67, I know that when Arafat visited the UN, it was 75, right?
Yeah.
Things were really different. It, it was, but there was still a really broad understanding among the American people that Israel was a country like the United States, where, again, as you put it, democratic norms and civilization uh, were things that Americans could relate to.
Yeah.
How is it that the Democratic Party that you were once a member, not just a member, an elected official of, has become such a comfortable place for people who are so hostile to the Jewish state?
Yeah. Ron, first of all, I want to point out to you that while I was a Democrat all of that time, anyone who checks my record, it's very clear, very public. I endorsed Republicans all the time, Ron. I endorsed Rudy Giuliani in 1988 against David Dinkins. No one else did that. No Democrat did that.
Joe, you know what people don't remember? Abe Koch, Ed Koch.
Yeah.
Ed Koch. He ran he had both the Republican and the Democratic nominations. I mean,
which, by the way, which I had in almost every single race. When I ran for re-election, even though I was a Democrat, the Republicans, conservative, in almost every race, every 2 years, 18 times, I had the support of the other parties. But I endorsed Republicans all the time. I mean, George Pataki against Cuomo. Who remembers Al D'Amato in 1991 against Bob Abrams? It didn't matter was a Jew Bob Abrams. I couldn't give a crap.
Well, that's interesting. You went for D'Amato over Abrams.
Of course, Al D'Amato was a dear, dear friend. He was fabulous for America, fabulous for Israel. That's what mattered to me always. I never, ever looked, Ron, oh, he's a Democrat. Oh, he's a Republican. Automatic. No, I never did that. But one thing is clear today, 2025, 2024, and it will be for a long time. The Democratic Party is an absolute disaster. Disaster. It doesn't stand for anything. They have no idea what they stand for. And they've done so much damage to America and so much damage to our friends. And people are getting it. The polls indicate that. And look, I just wish Donald Trump and his administration, look, it's only like the first inning of you would think the way Donald Trump is being treated, you would think he's been president for like a year or two. It's only like the first inning of the game. We got a long way to go, and many amazing things are happening in America. Thank God that we have Donald Trump.
I think it's also important for us to remember, me more than you, what we see in social media and the media in general is not real life. It does reflect certain trends, but most Americans are really the same people that we've always known them to be, especially when you get out of the New York area. You and I both bear the psychological and spiritual cost of a life lived in the New York metropolitan area. So we have a somewhat distorted, view of what the of what's really going on in American discourse. What you when you say what you just said in support of Donald Trump, what you must one of the things that I tried to explain to people, and I didn't have quite the platform that I do now when Trump was first running for president, not first, but in the 2016 election, was this anti-Semitism, Donald Trump anti-Semitism stuff is such an obvious crock. If you've lived in the New York area your whole life as we have, you know there is no way this guy was functioning in the real estate business as an anti-Semite. Literally impossible. No one ever, those two words, anti-Semite and Donald Trump, those two concepts never got anywhere near each other until he ran for president.
Ron, of course. I mean, it's so preposterous, so ridiculous. And what about his family? I mean, he has a son-in-law, his daughter married to a Jew, and she's Jewish, grandchildren that are Jewish. And one thing that no one could ever argue about, Israel has never had a better friend in the White House than Donald Trump. And Ron, and you know who's second and third in terms of best friend of Israel? Donald Trump. Donald Trump. Okay? There is no second, third. I mean, Reagan was a great friend, but no one compares. Telling the truth is important, everyone says. Every president always lied about moving the embassy to Jerusalem, right? Republicans, Democrats, it was in
Or
their platform.
they might not have been lying when they said it, but they got to the White House and made it a lie by not following through on their
They
promises.
they they weren't
Because the
telling the
State
truth.
Department professionals
You're
would
being very
convince.
kind, Ron. You're being kind.
Okay, let's be
You're
kind.
being kind. They knew it was not going to happen. But Donald Trump, who gets accused of God knows, he said he was going to do it, and he did it. Among many other things, he kept his word on something very very fundamental. So again, it's not about perfection. It's not about liking everything and so on and so forth. But we
But can you
live.
believe
Yeah.
when there was a period where, oh yeah, the ceasefire that the Trump attempted to or did help achieve between Israel and Hamas in January, late January, early February, and there were leaks about what it was about, and so many people who we think of as being in our camp, pro-Israel people. Trump stabbed us in the back. He stabbed us in the back. How can you do that? Like, people have no patience. No, like, everything is a reaction to to the moment. It
Well,
was
yeah,
so
Ron. Well,
insane.
yeah, you know how it works. I get this all the time. People calling me or sending me something. Oh, did you see? Did you hear? The person who's sending it to me, like, did you check this? Who sent it? Where did it come from? Nobody knows and nobody cares, Ron. It's like you just go with it. Unfortunately, that's the world we live in today. I always say to my kids, whoever, whatever book you're reading, read it in a critical way. Don't just accept everything you read. That's not a very healthy way to. God gave you a brain. There must have been a reason for that.
Well, as a lawyer, I'm in the business of looking and seeing a litigator in particular. I look for inconsistencies. I look for
Right,
lack of
right,
enforcement.
exactly.
I look for people take two vaguely related concepts and smooth them over, and there's a real problem with critical thinking. What kind of stuff are you doing to keep yourself busy besides the one or two people like me who ask you to be on a podcast every couple of days?
Well, I do a lot of interviews, whether it's podcasts or television. Working on the book now, which I'm very incredibly excited about, and also, I continue to get phone calls. We Fox just did a story yesterday about this swastika that was done on a Tesla vehicle in Brooklyn. That person,
By a Jewish guy.
yeah, that person called me. I called the DA, Eric Gonzalez in Brooklyn. He went on Fox the following day at my recommendation. So, people still constantly call our organization, Americans Against Anti-Semitism, and we're involved in doing whatever we can and working on a variety of different things. But, right now, the good news, Ron, is we have someone to help us. We had the Biden administration that for 4 years, they talked about anti-Semitism. They had conferences about anti-Semitism. They produced 87-page documents on how to fight anti-Semitism. And Ron, it was all one big zero because there were no consequences. Any student who destroyed property at Columbia University over the past year, destroyed property, beat up on people. Every single person, the charges were dropped, nothing happened, no consequences. That's what happens in the democratic world. And that's why, the Justice Department needs to come in and bring federal charges. That's the only thing that's going to work. The DAs in Manhattan, they're going to drop charges. You can do whatever you want to do. You can get arrested Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. No,
you can blow up a police car.
Yeah. It doesn't matter. It really does not matter. So, but there's a new sheriff in town.
There is, and one of his deputies is my former partner, Harmeet Dillon. And I don't know if you're aware of how much of a philo-Semite she is. She attended a day school when she first came to this country because her parents wanted her in a better educational environment. She is going to rock. And I'm glad to hear that you're still in the mix with your organization. I was going to pop a picture of the Americans Against Anti-Semitism screen up on. But if people want to just see what Dov is talking about with confidence, pride, and strength, we will always raise a collective voice to ensure that never again carries more weights in the shallow words of a mere slogan. But you know what, Dov, I always say to people when they talk about never again, we are obviously, like it says in Pirkei Avos, ours is not to complete the task, but to engage, to do it. Never again. God decides.
Right.
God decides.
Yeah.
We have to do everything we can.
Ron, that's my message always. Don't worry about saving the world. That's not your responsibility. People sometimes say, "What can I do? What difference can I make?" Just do your part. That's all that's required, and then everything will be just fine.
It is true. God runs the world. We have our obligations. You have made a lifetime of seeking to fulfill them and to fulfill them. So it's been great talking to you. The time flew by. Let's do this again.
Absolutely. An absolute pleasure, Ron. I appreciate it.
Thanks a lot.